Welcome back to Reynolds Runabouts, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Reynolds, and in this episode, I'm going to apply the TotalBoat high performance epoxy to the deck over the stain to seal the stain and then prepare the surface for the white lines, which will come next. So that in this episode, I'll cover the epoxy application, putting on the white lines, more epoxy, and then the two-part Epiphanis varnish that I'll use. So the first thing I want to do, these are brand new pumps. I had some left from another project, but I was not, I was a little yellow. I was not sure I wanted to go there. Especially if the whole idea is to get a clear epoxy and not a yellow epoxy. So first thing to do, what I'm going to do, these are brand new pumps, and I'm not sure that they're charged right. So I have what I call a drip cup. These drip cups go back over on my paint bench, and they just sit there. So if they do drip out of the pumps some other time, they always go, and then eventually you'll catalyze, and you'll have this hard chunk of stuff. So first thing I'm going to do, a couple times. There we go. I got that's one's charged. There's the resin. Let it all the way up. It's totally worth it to get them charged and to waste a tiny bit of resin. So the important thing is always let these pumps go all the way back up. The resin is always the slower one because it's thicker. So what I do is some people will go 1 and 1, 1 and 1. I just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's how I'm going to start. 6 is kind of my magic number. I've always found that I can work pretty good with 6 pumps of each and not have it starting to gel. So I go ahead and I just put in 6 of each. So in this case, I'll just go ahead and do the 1 and 1. So that gives you a 2-to-1 mix that you don't have to measure with weight or volume. They do this on purpose, and I've never had any trouble with TotalBoat pumps. I have heard of pump trouble with the clear penetrating epoxy sealer they use, their version, not Smith's. That I seen, you should use weight or volume and get it exactly right. The pumps just aren't calibrated enough or well enough to get it exactly right, where the resin has a little more, I think, wiggle room there. So what I do is I go ahead and I mix that for 2 minutes. I stir it, making sure I get the pot completely mixed. And then you can tell by it gets a little more viscosity to it, so it gets thinner. So I know I'm getting there. Plus, I've got my 2 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and pump these out, and then we're going to start putting it on the deck. So to start out, I'm going to do my deck pieces. This is the floor of the removable engine well, the 2 sides, and then the rear deck hatch. So what I do is I just put it on like paint. This has been drying for 4 days, the stain, so I know it's safe. So I just put it on, and I go cross grain, like paint in varnish. You're trying to get it into the grain initially. So I'm going to start out with that, and then I end up tipping it, which the tipping not only puts it in the grain orientation, but it also removes the bubbles. And what I do is I do the whole surface. And if it starts to tack up, I'm going to want to grab it. You don't have to do it immediately, but it isn't going to hurt. And that's just letting the brush glide across the surface to pop the bubbles. Because the bubbles come in from the process of mixing it. And what is happening, the epoxy is going into the wood a bit, and then it is taking the place of air that's down there. As part of the sealing process, it's replacing the air that's already there. So the stain is not sealing it, that's just for color. So I'll keep putting this on, and then when the bubbles come up, that means the air that it's replaced is now coming up, and then you have to take care of it with the brush just by popping the bubbles. It isn't any different than some of the sealer I use, like Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer, does the same thing. Whenever there's one chemical going in to replace an in this case, oxygen. That's the reaction that you have to just address. So, but it's not a big deal. Now, the first coat will take up a lot of resin because this wood is dry. And the next coat, which will happen in 3 hours, because I can do this every 3 hours, and the key indicator is that the epoxy, each coat of epoxy that you put on, and I'm going to go back to do the wet edge technique. As long as it gets to like cellophane tape consistency, then you know that this surface is ready to accept more epoxy, but it's also cured enough where the bubbles have come to the surface and no more bubbles will be coming, because at this point the resin is getting so hard that the bubbles aren't going to come up anymore. It's been essentially sealed off. Even if there is air still down in that wood, they're not coming up now. They're done. And which is really why you do this, because it allows you to encapsulate the wood from both surfaces. And by using epoxy on the top surface, it gives you a durable finish against weather, sun. And then on the bottom, I did Smith's penetrating epoxy on the bottom of every deck piece and on every structural piece. They've been soaked in Smith. So I've essentially eliminated any water vapor egress into the boat at all areas, especially the plywood, because plywood has a tendency, because it is 5 layers of veneer glued together, there's already there's 4 natural separations there, that maybe 3 natural separations that would allow water to get in between the glue layers and the veneers. So this will essentially put all that to rest, because you're now preventing it in a very positive way. Again, this is not for everybody. I found that when I did 1955 Wagemaker 2 years ago, someone had done that, another restorer had done that, and I was impressed by how much it had protected the boat all of those years. And yes, it had been a boat that had been taken care of. That's a big part of it. But I also thought, well, they certainly gave it a really good head start by putting epoxy on everything. I even found it on the outside of the boat. The problem with using it on the outside of the boat is the vertical surfaces. And I have found that too. I did the transom on that boat, a large piece of the boat. That I really found that was where it might curtain or sag. Drips. It's too thick to drip, but it will sag on you. So I found that to be a little disappointing. But I went on, I powered through it, and I put one coat on the transom, and then went ahead and put more. I put more on the deck, a lot easier. But so that's something to consider. You've got to really be careful that when you're doing the vertical parts of the boat, you're going to have to deal with more sanding because of the curtains. But once you get that, in the end, you'll get 6 coats of epoxy on the boat over a 2-day period, in a sanding in between the third and the fourth. You have a beautiful surface, and it's worth it to do the sanding. When you can use an orbital with 220, 320, or 400, depending on how smooth you want to get it and how quickly. And sometimes the epoxy didn't go on as thick as you thought, so you have to be a little more careful. But when you get 6 on there, you're pretty good, and you can see the depth, and you're safe, and you can put 400 grit on your orbital on a flat surface and get a really good final prep surface for the two-part Epiphanes that goes on, or Epiphanes varnish. So it really is worth sanding out the sag. So I'll be doing that as well. So I'm going to continue on with these. Again, I'm just going to do one last pass as the bubbles are coming to the surface now of the air that's been replaced. You can already see the sheen that you achieve by putting the epoxy on, and it just gives you a beautiful surface to work with to put. You can really get in there with the sander. An orbital especially makes it a lot easier. Some areas I have to use the hand because it's just too tight for an orbital. But it gives you so much base to build on, and then going forward, when you have your any sort of varnish, you could put traditional varnish on top of this 6-coat, and when that traditional varnish starts to crack or wear or get old, you can take it off easier because you have a beautiful built-up epoxy layers that are doing the protecting. The varnish gives you the shine, but it also kind of gives you a little safety area where if you start to see it go, you still have time to work on it and get that varnish off, and then you can go back and put more varnish on year after year, knowing that your deck is always going to be safe. You'll never have to get in to the stain by accident or the white lines that go on the boat. They're always protected. And again, you're preventing water vapor egress and surface water. What boat show have you not been to that didn't get a rainstorm periodically or a travel that turns out a little wet? It's just, for me, a really great way to save myself time in the long run and through time and less varnishing. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going with this, and then I'll go over to the deck. So I did some experimenting, and the roller, if I put enough on it and I'm careful, I can get enough resin on vertical surfaces to make it work. I have to just really work at it to get it in there, but it seems to be working quite well. I did it on the seat backs, just kind of get it all spread first, and then I can start reworking it. So that is excellent, because putting this on by brush in the past has not been real good. It just seems to sag and curtain too much. So I'm glad this worked out to really allow me to get some of these vertical surfaces out of the way before I go ahead and do the deck. It's just easier to work inside out. So I'm gonna just keep doing that. I did the backs of the seats and it worked out real nice, so I'm real happy with that. So I'm gonna keep going on this. You might wonder why I'm doing these plain sides. These plain sides get painted black. So what I'm doing essentially, I'm sealing the wood and also providing a really good base. So I'll do this with 3 coats as well as everything else. And then I'll have a really nice base for my Alexil paint to adhere to. It likes epoxy, and it'll be so much smoother, and I can be able to just go ahead and paint that and not have to worry about fairing it too much. So I'm going to keep going on this and get the inside done, and then I'll move to the deck. In addition to the panels that are on they go in here, sorry. I'm going to do this. This is going to be a very wet area. And like I said, everything's been already sealed with Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer from the use of the backside, and then all of the lumber. So it's important that I get all of these plywood veneers covered as well. I consider it part of the deck because it is going to get wet in sun and wind. So I'll be doing this as well. And then when I go to put everything back together, it'll be sealed and shiny with varnish. All right, I got that interior all done. Nice and shiny. Back of the seats, the supports, the inner combings that will become black. And then the seat backs, even though they're getting covered with the new upholstery, the upholstery has boards on them as well. So they go right attached to the back. But why not coat them now and make them safe? And then the dashboard. So yeah, usually the roller, just, putting a lot on and trying to keep it even was the key. So now I'm gonna get another batch mixed up and I'll do the deck. Now I'm on to doing the deck. This is gonna be the longest of the projects on this because there's just so much territory to cover. So still gonna use my 6 pumps. It gives me a good working time if I ever have to stop for some reason. I'm only 6 in and won't hurt anything too badly. It's always good to have the ability to stop if you have to and take care of something else that's happening in your life. So I'm going to go ahead and just start working on the bow here and work my way back as like a wet edge for painting. Again, I'm going to cover this unstained area because it's all part of the deck. I want it sealed, but also it's going to get Epoxy white paint goes on here when I put tape on, obviously. So I'll have a white border all the way around the boat, one down the middle and down the hatch, and then I'll go ahead and put on the white stripes too. So I'm going to get at that. Just a little reminder you probably saw earlier in the video. I'm just going to start putting it on. I've got tape on here because I don't want it going onto my finely polished side surface here. I'm going to do it down the middle because this is going to get paint. All of this is going to get sanded. So for the most part, I don't have to worry about, stop and start lines. Just going to work it in just like I did on the smaller parts earlier and just have a really good time just putting this on and waiting for the next 3 hours, and then I'll come back. So I'll keep doing this and I'll check in as I go along. Well, I'm on my second pot of 6 pumps, and I noticed that you get to the end of the pot, starts to get a little thicker. I love the beginning of it, it's nice and thin, but that's what it's supposed to be doing, and I know it's working. In fact, when I did the hatch covers, the first parts I went ahead and did a 6 pump pot, and I waited. I guess I always had this feeling that if something went wrong, I'd rather have the epoxy not kick and get hard on a small project versus a deck. So I chose that with some purpose to you never know. It's chemicals. Maybe somebody had a bad day at TotalBoat factory and the resin didn't do what it was supposed to do or won't do. So I always like to call it a sample, but I knew I could fix those a lot easier than I could fix the deck. So I went ahead and just did that. And of course, things turned out fine. I waited that first 3 hours, and it was tacky like it should be. And later that day, it was hard just like it's supposed to be. So always a good thing. Gonna finish up this aft deck, get another pot, and work my way down the starboard side. Well, I've come around the bend and now I'm working on the starboard aft deck. Things are going well. Got a new pot of TotalBoat high performance epoxy going. Things are smoothing out. I wanted to point out when I get over the where the hardware goes, I have paper and tape under all of the fastener holes that have gone through the deck, and I'm making sure that I'm getting lots of of this resin in those fastener holes so that they will be sealed. So when I go back and put in the hardware, I'll drill them again with a smaller drill bit, because these are oversized at this point, so that the epoxy will form like a sleeve around that fastener hole. So even though I'm going to be putting dolphinite or maybe 3M 4200 under the hardware to make sure that they have like a gasket is created between the deck and the piece so water can't get in. I'm also doing the belts and suspenders approach to this by having the deck completely sealed, even where the fastener holes, like here's a vent, where the vent is going to be sitting. That has now going to get epoxy as I go around the perimeter of that and make sure that gets soaked. And then the fastener holes that will hold the vent will also get lots of epoxy. So that'll help me, just give the boat some more life if ever it leaves my possession and somebody doesn't take care of it as well. It'll always have a pretty good start on life. Also, I have, what was I going to say? Yeah, lost my mind, left my mind. So going to keep doing this and go ahead and just work my way up the starboard rail and hit the deck. This is my 4th pot of resin, 6 pumps, 24 ounces. This will get me well beyond the deck. I am also going to be putting epoxy on the inside of my hatch cover and engine well pieces. That was the first section that I did on the video. So I'm going to go ahead and just be very preventive and put epoxy on the inside of those as well. And they'll be open periodically. They're all going to get a lot of water action, especially the engine well and then the hatch. There's a rainstorm coming. I just don't know when it's going to be. I might as well have everything covered. So even though I have Smith's penetrating epoxy sealer on the inside of those components, I'm going to go ahead and just do that, give it a nice surface. And the beauty of this is it's saving me so much time on varnish that I would have to do just as much varnishing if I didn't do that. So, and I have lots of epoxy and I'm into the groove. I might as well go ahead and do it. So I'm going to do that. I have been noticing today that if I work this too much, it gets a little milky. I have to be careful. So just keeping myself just a one cross grain and then a pull, and then maybe a tip. So, because it gets air in it and just gets kind of milky looking. So I want to not have that happen. So I'm going to finish this up. And here's the last instrument hole. Make sure that gets lots of epoxy down in there. Like I said, I've got paper on the inside of the boat and tape under each of these holes. Make sure I can even fill these fastener holes a little bit, let them drain down in there. Again, they're going to get re-drilled with a smaller bit that is more appropriate for the size of the fastener, and really have a nice preservation plan for this deck. So I'm going to keep doing that, and then I'll check in when I get back to those pieces again. Well, there it is. Oh, it's shiny glory. It's always good to see the first coat on. It really does point out the the work that remains with putting the white stripes on the sides and then down the middle. So yeah, everything that I want to encapsulate in epoxy has now been completed. and then I'll work on the parts on my table. So now I'm on to the second coat of the clear pigment or the high performance epoxy. This is after 3 hours, and I have a cellophane tape consistency. So now what I'm going to do is use the roller, because the foam roller tipped with a brush will allow me to go ahead and put more on smoother, and a lot of the soaking up has already taken place. So I'll need probably half as much, and I can do it in half as much time using a roller with a tip. So again, I just go ahead and put it on like I would the like a paint or anything else. And you can always move it around once you get it on there. And I'm just going to go ahead and smooth it on. I really like this stage because it allows you to do some buildup, but it goes so quickly with your roller and your brush. The way putting finishes on should go. It's like putting the varnish on, making sure I get all the dry spots covered. This just shows you how fast you can do things. I mean, every 3 hours you can put a really nice coat of this epoxy on, which equals about 3 coats of traditional varnish. I mean, I'm talking like the high build varnish that we get from like Pettit. I can never do this with Pettits and not have just a really clogged up sander and sanding block on my paper. So I'll get this done. The one thing about the roller, if you were to like really focus on one area with these rollers, you can literally make the epoxy look milky, and that's because of the air bubbles. So again, that's one reason why you want to use the brush, but it also just tells you not to don't get too vigorous with the rolling. I don't see too many more bubbles than I did when I used the brush on the first one. Again, I'm just taking my brush and dragging it, trying to keep it flat, popping those bubbles, and bringing a little bit of grain to it. And there I go. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on these two, and then I'll jump back onto the boat like I did on the first one. So I'm back at 2.5 hours later, and the first side has already started. So this is more like a 3 hour, and this one's 2.5, and it's a little bit cellophane yet. So I'm going to start with my second coat. And like I did on the parts, I'm just going to use the roller because most of the epoxy that I put on the brush in the first coat has soaked in and provided a really smooth surface now for me to use. So now I can go ahead and do the roller approach for coat 2, and then I just follow it up with a brush, a lot less brush action and more of a dragging action. And this is letting me take the bubbles out of the epoxy. So I'm going to keep doing that for the whole boat. It should take less than an hour. The first brush coat took 1.5 hours. This should take about an hour or less. So I'm going to get right at it. I'm tipping my head at this extreme angle because I'm trying to see all of the reflection on the deck for the bubbles and for any dry spots. So you really have to kind of contort yourself some days to get it, but I'm happy with it. There's some bumps, but you know, this all gets sanded down before I put the white lines on. So later today, in 3 hours time, figure out where my dry spot here. In 3 hours time, I will be back to put coat 3 on, and that will be it for the decks and the parts. And then I will spend at least a day sanding this work, this last 2 days worth of work. I'll be sanding it down so that it's flat. And part of that, well, 2 reasons. It's supposed to help. It will help. It will help me. It will help me get a good flat surface for my coats 4, 5, and 6, which go over the white lines, and they go over the whole deck. But they're meant to go over the deck to cover the white lines so that they're always protected and it's smooth. So when I put the varnish on, you'll never be able to feel those white lines, which will, you know, if they ever got hit or sun damage, you wouldn't want to go in and have to fix those white lines, you know, onesie, twosie. So the whole idea is to protect the deck, protect the white lines, give myself an incredibly flat surface to put final varnish on, which then gives you that incredible Epiphanes 2-part PP varnish. You put that on, it just flows out, and it's just amazing. So laying the foundation for a varnish, it's like doing the sanding. You got to get it right, and then you do the epoxy, and then you finish up with that beautiful varnish, and it looks great. So I'm gonna put a second coat on the interior parts I started, and I'll see you in 3 hours. Well, it's the next day, and I'm really happy with how this first 3 coats of epoxy went on. Really hard, ready to go 12 hours later. So I'm gonna get to the next step in the next video, and that'll be to sand this down, starting with, I'll probably start with 400 on my orbital using the Abronet, which is a net that goes on there. It's doesn't clog as much, and it has a lot more, I think it's just more use, and vacuums better, so I use that. I think it has a little more flexibility too, especially on this deck. I do not want to burn it through, so that'll be my next step. I'll also be adding the white lines, another 3 coats of epoxy, and then the 2-part Epiphanes or Epiphanes epoxy that is really ties in well with this epoxy approach. So thank you for tuning in. I had hoped to get farther, but I just really wanted to show you how the epoxy goes on and some of the benefits of it. So I went a little long there. If you're enjoying the video series, please hit the subscribe button, and you'll get my bi-weekly updates, usually on Wednesday morning. And then if you're enjoying it or you're finding it entertaining and useful, please hit the like button. It's always nice to receive positive feedback. If you have any comments, please put them below. Try to keep them positive and constructive so we can, you know, learn together and move on. So until next time, thank you for tuning in.